Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad to have you with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We are once again going to have an episode all on one topic, but no, it's not going to be OJ again this time. We had a long and detailed conversation about him yesterday, and thank you to those for your comments on that. If you haven't heard it yet, I encourage you to. Today, though, and this was not intentional, once again, it's just the way the topics lined up. The issue is higher education, and specifically the cost of higher education, but also the Biden administration's relentless efforts to flout the law and unilaterally provide what they call student loan debt forgiveness or relief, rather than really just transferring it from the actual people who took out the loans to people who didn't. And obviously that's unfair. We'll talk about that in a number of different ways, but is there a solution to this situation? And the answer to that is there certainly could be. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is one of those people. He was asked about this issue, I think this was yesterday, and he certainly made it clear that he thinks Biden does not have the power to do what he's doing. Also that he shouldn't, and that if there's going to be anyone on the hook for these loans, if students come out with degrees that cost them a ton of money and they don't have the means to pay it back, well, maybe where they got that degree should be on the hook for this as well. So here's what DeSantis had to say.
What he's proposing illegally, he doesn't have the authority to do it, is to basically say, if you're a truck driver, you didn't go to college, you don't have student debt, sorry, you're going to have to pony up to pay the student loans of somebody, who maybe got a degree in sociology or something and is not gainfully employed and can't afford the loans. That is not fair, and that's not something I've ever supported. Now, having the universities back the loans, to me, is just, because the universities benefit when students take out exorbitant loans. The universities benefit if somebody takes 6 years to get a bachelor's degree rather than 4 years. And what have they done in the era when there's been a lot of the free money out there with the student loans? Has the education gotten better at these schools? No. What has it done? It's led to a massive administrative bloat.
Well, that's certainly true. Some of these places, including the University of Michigan, but also the University of Virginia, it's been revealed lately, the amount of money they spend on DEI staff and a whole lot of other areas is just off the charts. And so, Jim, I think he makes a great point that if these universities want their students to be able to pay back the loans, which the universities benefit from, put them in a position to succeed once they leave. And he says one of those things is you could, scrap zombie studies and, make sure that people who come to your school are getting degrees in areas that'll be financially beneficial for them once they graduate.
Greg, you look at higher education in the United States over really the past two generations, because you and I are of the previous generation going to college in the 1990s. And I feel like, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that, the experience has changed considerably since then. We thought it was expensive then. And by the standards of the 1990s, it was. But it looks really like a bargain when you look at the prices of higher education in the 2020s. And at least for our generation, there was this adamant belief that higher education was an investment. That, you paid a lot, you might have to take out loans, you scrimped and saved, you had summer jobs, you did everything conceivable to scrape together the money, but it would pay off in the end. That it was a ticket to the middle class. That if you went and got a 4-year degree, never mind the possibility of a graduate degree, you were going to get a well-paid, often white-collar job, and that would, and you'd be able to pay off your loans, and this was how you went on to have a good, happy life. You could afford to buy a house. You could go on and live the American dream. College education became almost like a requirement to go out and live the American dream. And then probably shortly, after you and I departed, that started to break down. Now, some of this is if you, as you mentioned, sociology majors. I am sure there are genuine good sociologists in this world who make good livings. But the question might be, what's the job market for sociology majors? And we all make the jokes about basket weaving and all kinds of classes about, zombie studies and things like that. What you're learning, are you going to be able to make a living at it? And some, whether it was traditionally the role of the parent who had to ask, hey, are you going to be able to get a job after graduation? Or are you going to be working in a coffee shop or something like that afterwards? Is no dispute that there are always going to be kids who want to be creative writing majors or going to want to have dreams of doing something in which the odds of success are stacked against you. And the part of a college's job was to say, okay, well, you can do that. You can be a drama major. You can be an arts major. You can go for these things in which, anthropology, in which there probably aren't going to be a ton of job offers. But you'll learn enough to do something else while you're pursuing your career path in your passion in your studies. And it feels like over the past generation that has completely broken down, and that you end up with a lot more people who enter the job market not able to make a living. Now, maybe the process of automation, the process of the expansion of the internet all created a world in which there were fewer entry-level jobs. Think about it in newsrooms. The sheer number of, you still have interns, and as far as I can tell, they're all really good or at least knowledgeable, even if they don't always know as much about O.J. Simpson as they should. But it used to be part of office culture that you would have either interns or new hires, and the jobs would not involve an enormous amount of complicated work. You'd be refilling the photocopier. You'd be refilling the coffee machine. You'd be answering the phones. You'd be dealing all kinds of stuff that was kind of clerical work, but it was getting you into that work environment so you could begin your career. And maybe that went away. Maybe that's a complication to all this stuff. But the universities acted as if everything was a situation as normal. And ironically, we live in an era of really high inflation in the last couple of years. It was completely normal to raise tuition considerably higher than the rate of tuition. And the sense was they could do this because American parents would scrimp and save to send their kids to pay the kids, get the kids there. And secondly, the government was always going to offer more loans. The government was always going to be there, offer more grants. The government was going to keep throwing money at the problem, so that no matter what happened, you were never going to have a university that had to lower tuition. The only person who wanted to keep tuition flat would be some maniac like Mitch Daniels when he was over at Purdue University. I managed to do that, I believe, for 8 years consecutive. It was close to a decade, and it was entirely because he was adamant that no, we can find ways to cut the other services so that we can keep giving a quality education for the price that it cost when I came in here. And my understanding is that maybe Hillsdale did it, maybe a handful of colleges did that. But otherwise, most universities, it was just considered normal not to have a 2, 3, 4% increase, but 7, 8, 9% increase year over year, so that by senior year you're paying a ton. Anyway, good for DeSantis here, and I think this is what you need to talk about. It's kind of the mirror image of what we're going to talk about in our next martini.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, Hillsdale's in a fairly unique position. There's a couple other schools that do this, but Hillsdale didn't take any federal money, and that includes student loans. So the government can't goose the tuition that way. Hillsdale's obviously gone up since I was there, but not at the same rate that other schools have. When you and I were going to school, it still varied then, but it was $20,000 a year before financial aid kicked in. The raw costs compared to now are quite a bit different. And so obviously you want to get out of there with a degree that you can use. At the same time, as a Hillsdale grad, I should point out that it's, look for a good school that has a good liberal arts base that'll get you some education in the American founding and basics on economics and great books and stuff like that as well. So you actually know something other than what your job is. It's kind of important. All right. 4Patriots. 4patriots.com/martini is where you want to go. And they have fantastic deals on so many things. Right now, some of the great deals include the Leafy Greens Hydro Garden Seed Kit, the 4Patriots Bountiful Green Plant Food, the SonoWrap Therapeutic Blanket, and the Solar Go Fridge with the solar panel. But right now, the big news there, the deluxe 3-month survival food kits are finally back in stock after being sold out for more than a year. More than 200,000 Americans agree that they have survival food that tastes good. You just never know when it's going to be difficult to cook meals in the normal way. You want to be prepared. And so they've got great recipes on things like pancakes, mac and cheese, potato soup, spaghetti, lasagna, and a whole lot more. You can stash food away and be confident that when a disaster strikes, you and your family will be ready. Go to 4patriots.com/martini to get the deluxe 3-month survival food kit and the peace of mind that you deserve. Plus, get free shipping on orders over $97. That's the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And the bad martini here is something that's been highlighted repeatedly, periodically when she guest hosts for you on this podcast, but also on her Twitter feed and her own podcast and everything. And that's Inez Stepman of the Independent Women's Forum, who not only thinks universities could potentially be on the hook for this if their graduates can't pay off their loans, but she also wants to tax endowments. She thinks that is a area that the universities do not deserve tax breaks on and things of that sort. But she is also extremely frustrated with Republicans. And that's because as Biden keeps pandering to the people with these massive student loans that they still have to pay off, the Republicans are not putting up an argument other than, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional, which they're right. But if you're a person staring at a mountain of debt and the one person is saying, I'm going to make that go away for you, and the other person is saying, nah, I don't want that to go away for you, it's not hard to see why they would side with the person who wants to make it go away. And so the Republicans need a message on this. And whether it's taxing the endowments, whether it's putting the universities on the hook for paying if the students can't, messaging is critical. We talked about it. Republicans being caught flat-footed on abortion earlier in the week. This is not their strong suit, and it really needs to be. This is a golden opportunity for them, especially given the high cost of higher education right now, and they're fumbling the ball again.
Yeah, it's really infuriating, and I'm left wondering, is this because so many Republican lawmakers in the House and Senate, Donald Trump, are well beyond the age in which they're paying for college tuition for their children? A lot of Republicans are in the grandparent years, and for them, it's something they did earlier in life. It's just not something that's front and center. It's not something they're dealing with right now. It has been interesting to watch the Nikki Haley's and the Bobby Jindals and some of these younger Republican governors who had presidential ambitions. And then usually they take a few years off to make money in the private sector, in part because even they, having made gubernatorial salaries, which are not small, find themselves, I don't have an extra $100,000 to pay for tuition for 3 different kids. So there are certain Republican lawmakers who do get this and who do recognize this. But it is kind of fascinating that, and kudos to Inez for pointing this out, that this is the sort of thing you'd think this would be a big, ample, not defended piñata of a public policy issue that Republicans could whack away at. By no stretch of the imagination is Donald Trump a friend of the higher education establishment. I think it's safe to say he doesn't think very highly of it. But I also think it's safe to say he doesn't really pound the drum on this all that often. And if he does between now and November, that could probably do him a lot of good on this. I think a lot of people were shocked and appalled by the outbreak of anti-Semitism activism that they saw on campuses after the Hamas attack, but just generally a sense of why do universities get to operate the way they do, and why are they always kind of given this constant benefit of the doubt? For a couple of years now, you've heard Republicans say, look, when I say Republicans, I should point out, usually it's conservative think tank types who observe universities really act kind of like hedge funds. And, that they basically, they have large endowments. I think, it was at Harvard, it's got, it's up to billions now.
Tens of billions.
Tens of billions. They invest that. They collect all the earnings on those investments. They pay their head of staff anywhere from $8 million, a couple $1 million for the university president there. Lots of people making generous 6-figure salaries all throughout the university structure. But universities they're seen as, they're nonprofit, therefore they're good. And look, a lot of universities do important research, but they really are given this very broad, no one characterizes universities as being greedy. Never mind the fact, as I point out, tuition has gone up well above the rate of inflation year after year for decades now, with a lot of hard questions of, are you really giving a value equivalent to that? And with a great deal of skepticism over that. Why are universities always given this and a lot of us would strongly suspect, it's now all seen through the lens of politics. Universities are left-wing. Ergo, they're the good guys, no matter what's happening on campus. Never mind if Jewish students are being harassed. Never mind if they're being trapped in the libraries, and university administrators are struggling to offer the most quiet tisk, you shouldn't do that type response. But actual hedge funds, they don't pretend to be anything other than what they are. Yeah, we're out to make money. And yet that is seen as inherently evil, greedy, and selfish, and malevolent, and dangerous to society. But universities, which can have the exact same, hey, we want to make as much money as we can. We're charging people as much money as they're willing to pay. And yet none of that ever seems to catch up with them. There's an enormous opportunity for Republicans. And by and large, they have not taken advantage of it. And I don't know whether it's because, as I said, it's not something that they've dealt with in many years in some of the cases of some of these lawmakers. I don't know if it's something where they don't know if there's enough votes there. But you'd think between students who want to go to college and who look at the tuition rates and say, oh my God, this is insanely high. Between parents who want their kids to go to college and look at the tuition rates and say, oh my God, this is incredibly high. That there'd be an enormous group of voters out there who are ready for some criticism of higher education to say, you know what, they're not giving you their money's worth. They're not giving you their money's worth for a lot of reasons, but a big one is that we in the federal government have always said, oh, don't worry, we'll help. If you keep subsidizing people to pay the higher tuition, there's never any downward pressure on prices. There's never anybody who comes around and says, this is ridiculous, this is bad. We have to bring them down. Other than, as we said in that last segment, the aforementioned real rarity like Mitch Daniels. And so if you don't have any downward pressure on prices, they'll never come down. And so the Democratic answer to this has always been, oh, don't worry, we'll throw more money at the problem. Well, that only exacerbates the problem, because then the tuition say, oh, okay, the students have, students get more loans, more grants, then we can raise tuition again. And, I think I want to say it was Rick Perry who said, look, you should be able to give people a really excellent 4-year degree for $10,000. And everybody thought that was insane. But that, ultimately, let's strip out the rock climbing walls. And look, God bless you if you like rock climbing, but do you need all the bells and whistles? Do you need, if you can afford it and you want to have that kind of college experience, fantastic. But there are a whole bunch of people who cannot afford that, who need a better option. Yeah, you can go to community college for 2 years, and that'll take 2 years of the expenditure away. But people want to get a quality education, and they want something that will prepare them for a better career. And that entire system is broken down, and it just feels like Republicans have really missed the opportunity, one, to help themselves, but also, two, to really help American society. Because I think you'd argue we've got this major breakdown between what it takes to go out and be prepared to the workforce and what people can, and the institutions that are supposed to do that.
No, that's extremely well said. And I think when the feds took over student loans entirely as part of the Obamacare legislation, which was kind of bizarre, that reduced even more incentive for limiting the amount of money being poured into the system. But now that the government is completely in bed with all these higher institutions, that the money train's not going to stop. Unless, as we'll get to in our third martini, something significant changes beyond their control. But the reason Republicans, I think, need to get on this is because when people hear the issue, you already paid off your loans, or you never took out loans, or whatever the situation might be, but now you got to pay for these people, they're incensed. But it's not like they get an invoice in the mail or in their email account saying, okay, here's how much you owe for all of Biden's student debt maneuvers here. They're not going to get that. And so without seeing that face to face, they're going to get distracted potentially by other issues. But Republicans will have a great opportunity here to help people out, the taxpayers, the students, the parents, and all the way around. Fast Growing Trees. Did you know Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the United States with more than 10,000, think about that, 10,000 different kinds of plants and more than 2 million happy customers right here in the U.S. They have everything you could possibly want, like fruit trees, palm trees, evergreens, houseplants, and so much more.
Whatever you're interested in, they can find it for you. They can find the perfect fit for your climate and space. And Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants will be shipped directly to your door in just 1 or 2 days. And along with their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, they offer free plant consultation forever.
They send you great stuff, whether it's houseplants or stuff you would put in your flower bed or in your yard or stuff you want to incorporate into your meals like we have with the basil and the oregano and so forth. Fantastic options. Check them out at fastgrowingtrees.com. And this spring, Fast Growing Trees has the best deals online, up to half off on select plants and other deals. Listeners to our show get an additional 15% off their first purchase when using the code Martini at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code Martini at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code Martini. Offer valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. All right, Jim, on to the crazy martini now. And you shared something with me this morning that I had not been aware of at all. We've heard for many years about the potential for a higher education bubble because people couldn't pay off their student loans. And so that might be one of the reasons why Biden's trying to do what he's doing, unconstitutional though it may be, in addition to pandering to people whose loans would be gone. But there's also the college enrollment cliff, apparently, which stems back to the financial crisis. And at that time, because of the financial impact on so many different families, people didn't have as many kids for quite a long time. And guess what? That was now 2008, 2009, 2010. Well, guess what? In the next few years, the kids of that era that were born are going to be graduating from high school and going to college. And as a result of the decline in births, there's going to be far fewer students applying for college, which could really shift the game here, Jim, because, the supply and the demand are going to be shifted here quite a bit, with many institutions still in existence, but not as many high school graduates for the taking. So what do you think the impact of that's going to be?
Yeah, before we go any further, I want to note, I feel like there are the people who've been talking about the higher education bubble, really, it feels like for more than a decade now. I think they all mean well, and they're telling it to us straight, and that's what they genuinely think. But, you look at tuition rates have kept going higher. Competition to get into these top tier schools, not just the Ivy League schools, but probably the top 25, top 50, maybe even top 100 colleges. The competition to get in is as intense as ever. And I think particularly, if you look at the response to the Hamas attacks, the left-wing hysteria and suppression of speech and just overall left-wing craziness is as bad as ever. So it feels like the higher education is always in the process, the bubble is always in the process of bursting, but it never actually bursts. And I think a lot of us would like to get to the point of which it has burst, in which this reset of the whole process. Well, the college enrollment cliff, which I only heard about probably about a year or two ago, is kind of fascinating. As you mentioned, the Great Recession happens. Unsurprisingly, the birth rate drops, and it actually stayed low for several years in a row after that. So each year, if you don't have babies now, you're not going to have a lot of 18-year-olds in 18 years. That's what's happened here. And so this is probably going to be really good news for the Columbus daughters. And one of the Garrity kids, the older one's probably going to be right as that shift is starting to occur there. But you end up in a circumstance where there are just going to be fewer applicants. And fewer applicants probably also means fewer who can afford to pay. And so all of these universities that have been able to say, hey, we don't really need to change our ways. We still have a ton of applicants. We still have, tons of people who can pay. We're doing just fine. You find the money, because if you can't pay, we'll find some other kid who can. Well, maybe that's going to change. That may change a great deal. You may have a lot fewer applicants applying starting in about 2025, 2026, 27, around there. Now, there are other ways around it. One of the other factors that has greatly expanded on college campuses over the past generation are the number of foreign students. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with foreign students. They often can bring a completely different perspective to the classroom. It's always great to meet somebody from a completely different country, completely different life. In theory, there's nothing wrong with that. In practice, what we've seen is that very often the kids who get admitted to a lot of these top, let's say 100 universities or top 50 universities in the U.S., very often they're turning into very wealthy kids, often from China and India, but from all around the world. These kids don't need financial aid. These kids don't need scholarships. They've got a wealthy mommy and daddy who can write a check to the campus, write a check to the college, and take care of it all there. And there have been people who have said, yeah, we've got foreign students, and some of them are not the sharpest knife in the drawer. They were admitted because they can pay, which is not, first of all, people raise the question, look, it's really good to have U.S. universities that are an envy of the world, and everybody all around the globe knows that if they send their kid to an American university, they're going to have a good quality education. But we built these universities to teach Americans primarily. That is job one. It's always nice to have foreign students, but that's not really what the purpose, particularly state-funded universities, and particularly those that get generous endowments from the U.S. government. It's always nice to provide education to other kids around the world. It's also very nice when you have immigrant kids and they decide, I really like living in America. I want to become an American. And I have a PhD, and I can do really exceptional things in computer science and things like that. But that having been said, the purpose of this is supposed to help American kids get up and be able to become happy, productive citizens contributing to the workplace for the next 40 years or so. That is not necessarily what's happening here. So I'm kind of hoping that this enrollment cliff will push these universities. And I also wonder if what we've seen in recent years is kind of this last dance before the clock strikes midnight and everything comes crashing down. I can't prove that. I just kind of wonder if we've seen how we've been warning about entitlement reform the need for entitlement reform for a long time. The baby boomers are retiring. The expenditures are going to get much higher. The number of people paying into the system. Clearly, the government will do something about this. And instead, the government's just partying and spending money like it's water. And there's no real reaction to it. And you kind of wonder if the attitude of the universities is, wow. Because I believe it's West Virginia, which made some really sweeping cuts, including ones I'm not sure I'm on board with. They wanted to eliminate all their foreign language education programs. We're getting rid of them all. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right solution, but the university president there is like, folks, we're going to have a lot fewer students in a couple of years. We've got to be making preparations now. Probably the specifics of how he's doing it are wrong, but that does seem like a responsible form. If you know you're going to have a lot fewer kids coming in and a lot fewer kids coming in paying tuition, then you probably had better look at your expenditures and say, what do we really need? What do we actually, what is absolutely necessary for kids' education? And what's actually a luxury that we probably can live without? Obviously, you're not seeing that at the overwhelming majority of college campuses. And I kind of wonder if there's this attitude of get everything you can now. You're going to hit that fiscal cliff because, look, if everybody in government has managed to avoid a ticking time bomb of fiscal irresponsibility for so long, why would we think higher education, the world of higher education, would treat it all that differently, Greg?
Yeah, no kidding. I'm just thinking about another thing that's a factor, I think, in the enrollment, especially going forward here. You mentioned that when we were in college, that was basically the expectation. Unless your GPA was just completely in the tank, you're probably going to go to college. Now, that's still, I think, the official narrative explanation. But as our friend John Gabriel wrote just a few days ago, there's a big rise in students pursuing the trade school and becoming plumbers, electricians, welders, and all these other things, which pay very well. You don't amass the debt. And if that's your inclination, why go to 2 or even 4 years of school and rack up 6 figures potentially in debt when you don't have to, and that's not where you feel led to serve as your career. So a lot of different factors now, a lot more options, I think, than we had at our time, and so all of that kind of plays into what could be a big number shift, like you were saying, here in the next few years.
Also, I feel like the perception of trade schools has changed. Like you're right. A generation ago, if one of your high school classmates said they're going to trade school, whether or not there should be judgment, but there was kind of this, oh, you've taken the blue collar track. Oh, okay. Well, it'll be nice seeing you over on the wrong side of the tracks. Enjoy it. We're going to be having, people probably accuse us of having 3 martini lunches for the rest of our lives. And kind of an ironic choice. But then again, the podcast title has always been ironically and deliberate. But yeah, and I do kind of wonder if a long undeserved idea that working with your hands was somehow, made you lesser or was a lower class sort of thing. So this was a topic when I was on Chris Wallace's program about a week ago, and I asked one of my friends who lives in Richmond, because my sense is the Washington, D.C. area, yes, if you did not go to a 4-year school, there's still a perception. There's still kind of a cultural bias against that. People, I think outside the Beltway is a very different story, and there's a very clear recognition that plumbers, contractors, even boiler, like welders, you can make 6 figures a year easily if you're really good at that stuff. And if you're making a good living, really, people are not going to look down on you very much at all. So probably depends on where you live in the country. But I do feel like that stigma or bias is rapidly eroding as people start asking, well, what do you get for all that money you spend on education?
Yeah, it's a great option. And if that's where you're inclined, absolutely go in that direction. And you won't have to deal with Joe Biden or anybody else with the student loans in a lot of cases. It's a much more affordable option as well. So more options, more choices. Always good for students and parents as well. Jim, big, busy week. Have a good weekend and see you Monday.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please subscribe to the podcast if you don't already and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific weekend and join us again on Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.